Hello and welcome to Politics. This is the last edition before round one of the presidential election, which is scheduled to take place this very Sunday. So to discuss who will arrive on top and who will arrive on top in round two, which is scheduled for May 6th, is Christopher Dickey, who is the bureau chief of Newsweek here in Paris. Also on the set, Denis de Montpion, who's a senior writer with Le Nouvel Observateur magazine and the co-author of a much talked about book on the secrecy surrounding French presidents. We'll ask him about some controversy about Nicolas Sarkozy. And last but not least, Bruno Jambard, the director of polling with Opinion Way. We're actually going to start, obviously, with some polls. There are a flurry of polls before the weekend. They more or less show the same thing. Here is one from CSA, which shows maybe a different thing because it shows François Hollande with 29% of voting intentions in round one, Nicolas Sarkozy with 24%. Far-right leader Marine Le Pen is third with 17%, ahead of Jean-Luc Mélenchon from the far left, and François Bayrou at the center. I want to ask Bruno Jambard. Opinionway also has a new poll that just came out. Does it say a little bit different things?
Well, a bit different from between Sarkozy and Hollande. We have them equal at 27.5%. But if you look at the order of Marine Le Pen, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and François Bayrou, it's the same. We have the same order, and it seems now that the battle for the third place will be much more between Le Pen and Mélenchon, with an advantage for the moment to Marine Le Pen, the National Front.
Okay, so you have them tied, Hollande and Sarkozy, in round one. In round two, the CSA polls a clear advantage for François Hollande, 58 to 42, which is huge by any measure. What do you have?
Well, 55 against 45, so it's pretty the same. I mean, the difference is not so important. I mean, it has been now for 2 years that Sarkozy is beaten on the second round in every poll that we have made. And it seems very difficult for him to fight against this anti-Sarkozysm on the second round.
Christopher Dickey, can he pack his bags and leave the Élysée?
Well, I hope not. It's going to be a very boring election season if that's the case, if we go by the polls. Personally, I'm hoping that he surprises people in the first round and either comes in dead even with Hollande or actually ahead in the first round and starts to build up some momentum. I mean, these polls are a little bit deceptive. There's a margin of error, 2 or 3%. You've got more than 20% of people are undecided. So there is room to maneuver. There is hope that there'll be at least a little competition here. But yeah, I agree. It looks terrible for Sarkozy, especially in the second round. It looks like he's dead meat.
Dead meat or not? Denis de Montpion, it's been the story, and Nicolas Sarkozy has said, okay, I need to be on top in the first round. Not only that, I need some breathing room to make sure I can rally more troops for the second round. And right now, he's either behind or dead even with François Hollande in round one.
He's probably in a bad state. But I think when you look at this pool, I mean, you should, remember what happened in 2002. There was a big surprise because up to now, many people don't know for who they're going to vote. I mean, you mentioned 25% of undecided, but in fact, many more, will choose at the last moment. Once they go voting, they might, choose, if they don't get up in a good mood in the morning, they might vote Marine Le Pen and Mélenchon. Nobody knows. And up to today, Marine Le Pen was credited of 20%, and I'm very surprised she's so low in the pool just now.
I mean, she's not that low historically.
16% is pretty the record of National Front in a French presidential election. So I won't say that it's low. I think that you have to remember that she's 16 with a candidate like Sarkozy, who is a very tough candidate for the National Front. It's not Jacques Chirac. Jacques Chirac was a very easy candidate for the National Front. He has always done only 20% at the first round of the presidential election. 3 times candidates and 4 times candidates, and 4 times only 20% on the first round. Sarkozy made 31 last time. He's about between 25 and 28 in the polls now. So I think if she's doing 16 with this kind of candidate, it's a pretty good level of votes.
Right.
But he lost much of his credit on topics, that favor National Front, because on immigration, it appears that maybe he talked, but he didn't do much in order to really stop the National Front to progress.
Now, I don't understand where he's going to get the votes at the end of the day. He, in 2007, he was able to draw some from the center. He, in fact, the first part of his administration, there was Louverture. He was bringing in a lot of people, and then at Grenoble a couple of years ago, he throws all that out. It's goodbye to all of them. I'm moving to the right. He moves so far to the right.
Grenoble being a speech where he linked crime and immigration.
Where he linked crime and immigration, said that you could even take citizenship away from people who'd been naturalized French if they committed certain kinds of crimes, kinds of things that people don't say in France, that even Marine Le Pen doesn't say. So what he did was to sort of give her a credibility that I don't think she had before. She started to look like the moderate on the right, which is not a position that the president wants to put someone like Marine Le Pen in. And I don't see where he's going to get the centrist votes now. I can see how people who have a lot of money are going to worry about Hollande and vote against him, but I don't see where people are going to vote for Sarkozy.
One key issue, the first round, it seems we know who is going to be in the second round, unless there is really a major surprise. Marine Le Pen has promised there will be a surprise. But it seems unlikely. But the key might be how many votes Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who has been the rising star of the campaign, gets, because some people say if he gets rather up to 15, 17%, this might scare off people in the center who could have voted for Hollande, but might, in the end, even though they might be holding their noses, vote for Sarkozy.
Well, it's not so easy to say that. I mean, because if Mélenchon is doing 15, 16%, but Hollande is doing around 30, it doesn't really count, because Hollande will be too strong to lose the second round, and so he doesn't need Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and he won't do anything between the two rounds to really the voters of Mélenchon. They will come, I would say, naturally. So
90% more or less will come to Hollande, right?
So it's true if the difference between Mélenchon and Hollande is not so important, for example, 25 and 15. On this situation, maybe it can change a little the election and the centrist vote. But that's why it's really complicated to read this election before the first round, because it's not only the level of votes of each of them who will be important, it's the I would say the level of votes compared them 1-to-1, which is going to be very important, and it's the same for Sarkozy. I mean, Marine Le Pen strong, it's a good point for him if he's strong also on the first round. But if he's weak, it's going to be a nightmare for him for the second round.
Do you agree that there will be a question of balance, or do you think now, at this point, it's basically too late for Nicolas Sarkozy because he has to get votes from the far right, from the center, and it's an impossible balance?
No, it's true. He looks pretty cornered just now because we saw, last Sunday at his meeting, even himself, doesn't seem to believe anymore in the victory now. I mean, the way he talks, he proposes one thing one day, the next one he changes his mind, and he does exactly in this campaign, what he has been doing for the last 5 years. In 2007, it was, we could give him credit because he was in a certain way new. And he decided, he offered to change a lot of things, but in fact, we realized after 5 years that he hasn't done what he did. That's terrible for him.
I think you can give Sarkozy credit for changing his mind or changing his policies as circumstances changed dramatically over the first few years of his administration. But you're right; it's like a parody now. This is the problem. He seems to change almost every day. Everything seems situational. That doesn't work. I'll try something else. I'll try something else. Let's grab something new, until people feel that they have no idea where he stands anymore. And one of his strongest points, probably, is to say that when it comes to the economy, when it comes to resurrecting the European economy, you need a steady hand. But that's precisely what he's not showing, is a steady hand right now. Nobody knows where he stands.
Right. And the Sarkozy camp has been telling everyone, wait for the second round. It's a totally different story than round one. It's a new election. How true is this historically? I mean, does the first round really have an impact, as most people seem to think, or is it a totally different story that could, in the end, favor Nicolas Sarkozy?
Well, it's true that we always have to wait the first round to really understand what's going to happen on the second round. But I mean, it's going to be a totally different story if this first round is different from what we are seeing in the polls now. If what we are seeing in the polls now is the result of the first round, there will be no other story. There will be only the same story following on until the second round. So that's why Sarkozy needs to be ahead on the first round. He needs to have 3 or 4 points more than Hollande. And if he's doing that, and if Hollande is only around 25-26%, with Sarkozy around 29-30, maybe it can be a different story. It's not sure, but maybe.
And there's one point I would like to underline. It's the fact as well, you know, that Chirac, who was the former president, has been telling, you know, people that he told publicly that he would vote Hollande, and just now many people who backed him up while he was president are supporting Hollande. And that will be a handicap, you know, to Sarkozy as well, because in a way, Chirac remains very popular in France.
Right, and some of the former Sarkozy supporters, even former ministers, are now abandoning the ship and saying they will throw their support behind Hollande. I'm not saying there are major national figures, but nevertheless, there is this perception there.
Well, and a lot of them represented his opening to the center in the earlier days. And that those people now are saying, we just have no use for this guy anymore. You know, I think that the tragedy, in a way, of Sarkozy is that people never did like him in this country. They always looked at him as someone who had this certain smell of a gangster about him. I mean, it's unfair. But they don't see Monsieur le Président, they see Joe Pesci when they look at him.
It's a barbarian from Neuilly-sur-Seine.
Yeah, he's a barbarian from Neuilly-sur-Seine. And that's, I think, very unfair. I think he's been a much better leader than that. But what's happening now is all those characteristics in his personality, the nervousness, the inability to control himself, the idea that he's strung out, all of that is getting much worse as the campaign goes on. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just confirming the sort of gut misgivings that people have about him. It goes even beyond policy. It's just the chemistry of the man.
I mean, do you sense this in polls? Because the Sarkozy camp, one of the other arguments that we're hearing is that on credibility, he's much stronger than François Hollande. But is that so true?
Yes, he is. But as you said, I think what was advantageous for him at the beginning, when he was elected in 2007, because the comparison was with Jacques Chirac. And Chirac, people were fed up with Jacques Chirac and the way he behaved, not really deciding anything. And
the lazy king, as Sarkozy described it.
Mm-hmm.
But he stayed 12 years as well, you know. It's
yes,
not
but 12 years, but with 2 years only governing the country on the first mandate. I mean, just remember that. So he was not really he was not really ruling the country. So this was advantageous for Sarkozy in 2007 because people were fed up with that. But now they don't remember anymore Jacques Chirac. They just remember the mandate of Nicolas Sarkozy. So they are saying to prefer to come back to someone like François Hollande, who is looking much more than Jacques Chirac. And I guess that in 5 years it's going to be the opposite that will occur.
What does it tell you that Hollande can run a campaign where his strongest argument is that he's normal? You know, I mean,
he can just sit and relax. Basically.
I'm normal. I'm a normal guy. You know.
But that could be a good point for him because in a state.
It seems to be.
Well, it seems
because
to work.
Because France is going through a terrible crisis, and in a way, after 5 years of energic Sarkozy, they need to be reassured in a way. So when they see a normal guy coming along, I mean, they identify to him in a way.
Okay, I want to get to one of the reasons Nicolas Sarkozy may not be normal is something you've written in your latest book and that sparked a lot of controversy reactions from the president himself. Basically, I may be exaggerating, you're saying that he is doping himself to be in shape or more than in shape.
No, what we tell in the book we published is that Nicolas Sarkozy takes medicine which is not allowed on the French market. These are kind of pick-up and stimulating medicine that you find in the States, in Holland, in Great Britain as well, and that sometimes as well, when he's too high, he takes pills to just calm down. I mean, it's well known, and
But he didn't like it.
We've just written it. That's all.
But he didn't like it.
No, he didn't appreciate that. No, indeed. But he doesn't like, because Sarkozy promised in 2007 that he would, make the full transparency on his health, contrary to Chirac and Mitterrand. And as a matter of fact, he never did so, because a few months after, he entered the Élysée Palace, he went to hospital one night, and I was the one who 4 months later published a book telling that he had been to hospital, and he became very annoyed and furious about it, because he was in a way, taken as a cheater, and he didn't appreciate that.
Right. Just very quickly, Chris Dickey, this is in total contrast with the situation in the US, where when the president has knee surgery, there are diagrams in the papers of the knee and everything.
Even the cholesterol.
Well, up to a point. Although we don't really see a lot about what medication any individual president is taking. And we don't have a president, I'm happy to say, who's ever been quite so emotionally out of control as Sarkozy. I mean, this is a guy, even Yasmina Reza in her book about the campaign in 2007 talks about how he cannot sit still. He cannot contain himself. He doesn't really have control over his face or his body. I don't mean in a pathological medical sense, but just in a psychological sense. He can't do it. I mean, I watched him once with Obama at Normandy in 2009. Obama was speaking, and, Sarkozy's like this. He just couldn't sit still. And if he's taking something to calm down, that may not be the worst thing that he could possibly do.
Okay, we'll see if Nicolas Sarkozy is able to find the right medicine. The first answer will be on Sunday, where we'll be hosting a special election night here on France 24, and we'll be discussing next week on politics if we were right to predict what we just predicted. Thank you very much for watching this edition of Politics here on France 24.